would you like the world to know about you?
Really, I'd like the world to know about me is that despite whatever limitations you may be given starting out, is that, from my story, starting out with a pretty bleak diagnosis, being nonverbal, being told that I probably wasn't going to graduate middle school or high school, that I'd probably be dependent on my parents for most of my life, is that if you have a good support system with you and you have the right attitude, you can accomplish much more than you can ever possibly imagine, even if you're just looking yourself in the mirror and you don't think so much in the moment. If you apply yourself over time, a lot more is possible than you think.
I love that. So you were diagnosed with autism at 3?
Yes, at 3 years old.
Obviously, you mentioned nonverbal being a challenge. What were some of the main strengths and obstacles with your diagnosis early on?
Strengths and obstacles. Okay, definitely with obstacles, because that's much easier to address. Is that obviously because I was nonverbal, I would have all these different things going on, especially a lot of my senses were kind of dialed up to 11. Like the way I describe it to a lot of people a lot of times is that, when they ask what autism really is, for me, it was much more of a sensory processing disorder than it was a social disorder.
Nathan, what is one thing you should not say to somebody who has an autism diagnosis?
I don't think there's one specific thing because, like you said, we're all so different. However, I think it shouldn't be something that you should or shouldn't say, but something that you should do is listen. I don't think a lot of people listen and pay attention enough to people who are on the autism spectrum, because it's not like they're not saying anything. A lot of them communicate in their own way, but a lot of times we don't listen and we don't pay attention.
You mentioned that you were pursuing higher education. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So immediately after I got out of high school, well, I should say before then, I was considering my options as to what I could do as far as pursuing college, what would be a good path to take, because I didn't really know one specific path. But a lot of my family was previous generation military. I still had my one lingering, I guess, kind of sensory detriment. I'm not really sure if that's really the right word, but it's the best word that comes to mind at the moment, which was with smell and taste. My diet was still very limited at the time, by the time I was 18. By the time from when I was 3 to when I was 18, my diet, essentially with a very limited list of other things, was 3 Pediasures a day, 2 Hot Pockets, and maybe something other like that. It was not very good. And so I figured, not only would the Army kind of just force me to change, because I didn't have like a real desire to change myself. I kind of need to push out the door, at least the way I saw it, even though my mom thought I was nuts. And then also I thought it would be a good way to pay for education, because I was a relatively good student. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA, but I wasn't exactly a genius or anything.
Where did you go?
To high school.
To high school, and then after high school.
And then after high school. So little high school in Bourne, Indiana, called Bourne High School. Then after that, joined the Army, into the reserves, went through basic NAIT, graduated there, and then I started going to Indiana University Southeast. Now, there's a whole book of family complications that happened after then, because I was still trying to keep a good part of my family afloat at the same time. I was doing college and working at the same time, and so I'd have to go through spouts where I was just working, and then spouts where I try to go full-time back into college. And right now, I'm still in a little bit of a hiatus because of COVID-19, trying to take some classes online, but right now I'm pursuing a Bachelor of Science of Psychology, probably going into my master's and my doctorate, and I was thinking about just making that a career in the military.
What is one misconception you currently see out there in the autism community that you wish was debunked?
I think one thing is that everyone with a diagnosis falls under the same rigid categories or the same rigid characteristics. When, especially in recent years, it being a spectrum disorder, it's much broader than that. And so every person that you encounter is an individual. So even though they may be autistic, and all of them will probably perceive the world in a much different way than you do, it's not the same as if Joe over here is autistic, and then you have Jane over here who is also autistic. Then they're not, you can't treat them the same way, because yes, they may have certain characteristics that go along with the disorder, but that doesn't mean that they're the exact same people and that they don't have their individual needs and concerns that you need to take into account.
What is one thing that you think helped you the most growing up with autism, regardless if it was a therapy, a specific person? If you just had to choose one thing that you think helped you the most in your development, what do you think that would be?
Without a doubt, and these two things are one and the same because without the other, they wouldn't have existed, is my mom and her undying faith that she instilled into me, that there was so much more than my diagnosis.
What do you consider up to this point in your life one of your greatest accomplishments?
One of my greatest accomplishments. Being able to take everything I've learned and to be able to uplift and educate people around me through all the experiences I've gone through, whether it was my diagnosis and my disability growing up, through all the family troubles that went into that, because I could write a book on that in and of itself, through going through the military. Just being able to have the blessing and the opportunity of making the most of every single thing that's gone into my life story to uplift, to educate other people, and to hopefully inspire other people to go beyond what they perceive as their limits.
Nice. Love that. With my autism diagnosis, I have noticed that one of the best strengths about my autism diagnosis is that it's given me the opportunity to have laser key interest. So like laser focus when it comes to key interests, especially when it comes to like sports, when it comes to theater. And theater was kind of the reason why I started doing public speaking. In the military, has there been any part of your autism diagnosis that you feel like has been able to be an advantage for you in your current job?
Absolutely. One thing with me that's always been a stickler with me is that I've always had, socially it's always been an impairment, but for the military it's great, is that for me, I always see things from objective perspective. It's very much black and white. Like, okay, here's the task, here's the most efficient way to do it, so just go do it. And like socially, I'd have a hard time, relating to other people exactly what they were feeling. It's like, okay, it's not going to matter within this context of time. Just because this person did this to you doesn't mean that it has to affect the rest of your life. Why are you dwelling on that? And that's something that I've kind of had to learn, but within the military is a great asset because you have to be able to compartmentalize.
Is there anything else you would like for people at home to know about your story? I know it's a very broad question.
I think if there's just one thing other than everything else that we've already discussed, is that autism is not confined in a box. There's a lot that goes on with it, and that people should understand that just because you're autistic doesn't mean that you're confined to that box. Everyone's an individual. They have all their individual characteristics that can be cultivated so that they can do something great within their realm of influence, whatever that happens to be, whether it's just within their community, whether they happen to decide to join the military, whatever that happens to be. But, there is a significant purpose for every single person.
Everyone, Kerry Magro here from a special community. I can't thank you enough for watching this video, and if you like this video, please click on some more videos around our YouTube page. We are just trying to give a voice to countless people in our neurodiverse community, so please, if you can, subscribe to our video page, and then you'll also get to see a little bit more about my story from nonverbal autism to today being a professional speaker. Thanks so much, y'all.